Hey everyone! Last time we talked about the general structure of the method section. Today we're going to focus on move 1, which is contextualizing the study methods. Okay, as we talked about last time, there are 3 moves in the method section, and today we're going to focus on contextualizing the study methods. This move is an important piece because it provides information about how your study fits into the larger research space in your field. Just as a reminder, remember that even though we're talking about these moves with numbers, move 1, 2, and 3, and the steps within them we're presenting in an order, they can appear in all sorts of different orders in your paper and in other papers in your fields. So the purpose of move 1 is to set the scene for your study, to provide general knowledge about how the field works, or provide knowledge about your particular study. Either of those approaches, and often both, occur within move 1. You also find references to previous studies that might include things about their methodology or data analysis. The author often states information about the description of their study site and information about the participants or subjects that may take part within the study, or other objects of investigation depending on what your field studies, of course. And this move really grounds the upcoming moves, which talk in more detail about the precise study. So it's kind of an important piece to really provide the context, as you can guess by the name of the study. Okay, within move 1, we have 6 steps. And all or not all may be present in the method section in any particular field. So you'll have to look at the information about your field in particular and do your own explorations to really see how these 6 steps interact together in your own field. But let's go through these steps separately, and we'll go through them in the order that I've got them listed here, but of course they can appear in different orders. I'm going to discuss the general purpose of each of these steps along the way, different ways that the steps are indicated, and show you examples of how the steps might appear in different fields. All right, here we go. Okay, the first step we're going to talk about is called referencing previous works. And this step, as it is called, provides information about previous research that's related to your current study. And this step is indicated by reference to an author, a date, or explicit mention of a particular study. And it seems to be a general requirement for most papers. Most papers that we've seen have some sort of reference to previous study here in the methodology section. And often this is used to contextualize some aspect of the methodology that the author has chosen. So, for example, the author might need some support to explain why he or she picked a particular type of study method, or to explain other sorts of choices that the author has made. And it also might be used to frame the results that are mentioned later. So if the author knows they want to refer to a particular study, perhaps to point out that their study found different results, they might discuss it here in the method section to be able to contrast it later on in the paper without surprising their readers. We have an example here, and in this example we have a description of a particular technique, a particular methodology, and we've got examples, we've got citations here at the end that provide support for the existence and perhaps even the effectiveness of this methodology. So we've got this is kind of the authors are using these references to provide themselves with support, that they aren't the ones who necessarily have come up with this plan. They're using this, and other people have as well. All right. The second step we're going to talk about today is called providing general information. And this step functions to really, again, like it's called, provide general background information for the methodology of the study. notice that with the previous step and with this step that we want to keep in mind that these are within the methodology of the study. We've had very similar types of steps in the introduction, but those were focused on in a different area, focused on kind of the general topic and theme of the study. This is very focused on the methodology precisely, so keep that in mind as we go. So, like I said, the function of the step is to give background, theoretical, empirical, etc., to the methodology of the study. And it appears to be required or almost always required for methodology sections in general. So the step is used to link information to the reported study without citations. So providing general knowledge that somehow is relevant to the particular methodology of your study, to give the reader some orientation to the specifics of the study, making sure that they know certain information that would be important for your study, and also to make some preliminary interpretations or predictions about the study in discussion. So we have an example here. We've got, it should also be noted that when the catheter is inserted to a patient, the CSII infusion system would face a pressure fluctuation due to the patient's blood pressure. Okay, so we don't have any citations. This appears to not be very specific knowledge. It's certainly not knowledge that the authors felt they needed to cite, but it's some background information that would be important to know to be able to understand more about this system and perhaps about the details of the study in general. All right, the next step we're going to talk about today is called identifying the methodological approach. And this introduces the particular approach or experimental design used in your study. And this could be a specific listing of approach or methodology name, experimental, quasi-experimental, or other ways of explaining the type of study that you're conducting. It's very common in many fields, and the main function is just, like I said, to introduce this approach, to be able to kind of say it clearly for the audience. It may also announce various types of credible research practices, and, so that the readers know that you're conducting research appropriately. And it could also provide a transition to the next step that would be to describe more about the procedures. So here in our example we have this study employed a repeated measures experimental design with one independent variable with 4 levels. So again, we've got a very clear description of the particular methodology, the particular approach that was used here. Okay, the next 3 steps that we're going to talk about appear depending on the details of your particular study in your field. So in other words, you would only use these steps if you have the information to put within them. So for example, we have this step is describing the setting. And in this step, you would describe the conditions of the research environment. You might answer the where question in this step. So for example, you might need to locate your study within the context of a particular physical environment, a university, a cornfield, a particular type of petri dish. You might need to provide information about the time, temperature, or seasonality of your study. You might need to provide other sorts of information that can help the reader visualize the physical environment or atmosphere of your study, a crowded classroom, an empty classroom, and all of the information that you need to help situate your study in time, space, or context would go within this type of step. This step does not include the tools that you used or the particular experimental procedures, however. It just includes the conditions that are relevant for how your study took place. So for example, we've got the first sentence here: all manipulations were performed under an atmosphere of nitrogen using the Schlenk techniques or glove box. Okay, so what were the conditions? They were in an atmosphere of nitrogen. And the second sentence, the complete experimental protocol lasted approximately 2 hours. Okay, so again, more information about the time and place. You could see that you could have many, many sentences that perform the function of describing a setting, depending on the complexity of your research and how much of it needed to be explained. Okay, the next step here, introducing the subjects and participants. You can clearly see that this step would only be included if you actually had subjects or participants. So if they are not included in your study, you of course wouldn't need to put information in this step. But this would describe the original characteristics of the subjects and their selection or recruitment. And the subjects or participants could be animate or inanimate. You may need to describe the characteristics of plants, for example, but anything that was undergoing any sort of transformation in your study, you might need to discuss. For a study involving humans, this often answers the question who, and without humans, it often answers the question what. What did you study? So when thinking about this step, you want to think about all the information that you need to describe the pre-experimental characteristics, the original characteristics, qualities, properties, origins, numbers, compositions, construction, so that the readers understand how you came to have these particular subjects or participants and what characteristics really describe them best. You also want to explain, if necessary, how those participants or subjects were recruited, if they were humans, for example, or selected. And there may be a little overlap between this step and with a step from Move 2, the experimental procedures later on. And we'll discuss that a little bit when we get there. But sometimes it can be a little unclear, and that's just kind of the nature of the situation. With this step, for example, we have male and female participants who were recruited through advertisements placed in local and Melbourne-based newspapers, as well as flyers placed in local community centers, libraries, and health centers. So we have information about gender, so the two types of participants, both male and female, and then we have description about all the different ways that they were recruited for the study. We could predict that we'd also get information probably about their ages, about the total number of participants who were in the study, and perhaps even more information about their race or ethnicity, information about their background with regards to whatever area the study was interested in. Okay, our next and last step for this move is rationalizing pre-experiment decisions. And this step functions to help justify any sort of methodological choices that you have made to set up your study. So you can use this step to explain and justify decisions that you made to limit or expand the scope or breadth of your study. You may need to discuss practical considerations that might have impacted your study. There were only women in the class, and thus the study only examines female responses. Or provide other sorts of information that might have limited or impacted your study. And so this information can include things like the reasoning or rationale behind your experimental context, the setting or selection of the setup of your investigation, and you might need to justify your choices or connect those choices to the general research purpose so that you can really explain to your readers that there are reasoned and reasonable processes behind where you've ended up, that your choices weren't necessarily haphazard, or if they were in reaction to conditions that were just around you. You only had women in your class, so you're only able to study female responses, that it wasn't your random choice, that this is kind of the reality of the context you found yourself in. This is very useful because it can help establish your credibility, that you aren't being random and random here meaning haphazard, not not random as in random selection, but that you are being thoughtful in your research. So you may need to explain some things that have happened so that your readers can understand you better. Okay, now that we've talked our way through these 6 steps, I'm going to provide you with an example. I'd like you to read through it and decide which step you think best or steps best describe the function of that sentence. So I'm going to show you the sentence. Feel free to pause your recording so you have time to read it and think about it, and then we'll discuss what you see. Okay, go ahead and pause your recording. Okay, did you get a chance to look at it? Let's look at what the answers are for the sentence. Okay, so we've got beef inside rounds obtained from a large commercial slaughter facility were selected from top choice and select quality grade categories on the same day and transported to the University of Arkansas red meat abattoir. Okay. We've got here, I've underlined some words for you to help you kind of figure out where the sentence is. We've got beef inside rounds were selected and transported. We've got information that introduces our subjects and participants. It tells us, in this case, not really who, right? But what was involved in the study. Okay, so in this study we've got some beef inside rounds that were selected and transported to be studied. Okay, our next sentence here, take a moment to look this over. Okay, did you get a chance to read this one? There are a lot of symbols in here, but we can still figure this out even without looking at all the mathematical symbols or even knowing what they mean. We've got, if we look at the red text, a metabolic reaction is defined, and then we have, for instance, the reaction glucose, lots and lots of symbols, could be given by, and each metabolite consists of. Okay? All of this information is providing general information. These aren't things that have citations attached to them, and if we knew more about these metabolic reactions, we would know that this is general information that the authors want to remind us of, but it's not specific or specific to their study in particular. Okay, another step for you to look at. All right, do you get a chance to read this one? This is a very long sentence. And within this sentence, we can see that there are a lot of citations. So that first gives us a clue that we're referencing previous works. But as you remember from the other sections we've looked at and the other moves, we've got to make sure that the whole sentence in general functions to reference previous works, because we can always have more than one move or step woven together. And we can see here that we've got the sentence, if we ignore all the citations, says, it should be noted that while microchannel flows driven by pressure force, capillary effects, electric fields, or centrifugal forces have been studied extensively in recent years, the majority of these previous studies were conducted with the microflows in steady state and driven by steady, time-invariant, compelling forces. So again, even the sentence, even without the citations, the sentence is functioning to reference previous works and to provide us with this context of previous studies that have been conducted. Okay, another step here. Okay, you got a chance to read this one? Let's look at it together. I've highlighted 2 portions here in red, and actually, I guess it's 3 sentences. And the first part says, the website also offered an area for the participants to post and respond to messages. This might include suggestions for other participants, etc. And each group had their own separate message board to prevent contamination. All of this describes the setting. So we're not really talking about who the participants are, but we're talking about the context, the environment in which they interacted. So we know many more things now after we've read this about how this website was constructed or what it contained. All right, another step. Okay, let's look at this one together. We've got the use of natural surface as a criterion is in keeping with the requirement in Harrison et al. That the surface and the green spaces be predominantly natural, earth, water, and living things. Okay, you can clearly see the referencing previous works. right? We've got a reference. But is that the entirety of what the sentence is doing? When we look at it, we can see that the whole beginning of the sentence, the use of natural surface as a criterion, is in keeping with the requirement of Harrison et al. And what we're seeing here is not really just a reference to previous works. It's not purely a description of Harrison et al.'s study, but rather a justification of why the authors chose natural surface as a criterion. We have an example of that, rationalizing pre-experiment decisions. And here they're saying other people have done this as well, and that's why we chose to follow their approach. So you can see here we've got two steps functioning together in this one sentence. All right, another example. Okay, we've got goal-setting theory, developed by Locke and Latham, was used as part of the design of the study to maximize success in achieving dietary and physical activity changes. Okay, you, I think, see the referencing previous works here, right in the middle, right? Developed by Locke and Latham, and 23 is an example of a citation. Depending on studies, they can look in different ways, but this is one way that authors can cite their references. But again, this isn't the entirety of the function of this sentence. There is this reference, but the sentence is doing more. And we have the part I've highlighted here in red for you. Goal-setting theory was used as part of the design of the study. Should be clear that this is really identifying the methodological approach. The function of the sentence is to say that goal-setting theory was part of the design of the study. This is the design of our study, and yes, other people did it too. So that referencing previous works is kind of a secondary part of the sentence, but it's still there. All right. Now that we've made it through these 6 long steps, I'd like you to go and review the reading. That will really help you look at how all these steps work and how they interact together. And as well, look at your corpus. Start looking to see how these steps work together in your own field. There'll be some corpus exploration tasks for you to look at to kind of help you with that, and then the quiz for this section. In the next set of presentations, we'll look at Move 2 and then Move 3 so that you're fully versed in the methods section.